right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our second ever GFI LINC seminar. My name is Marika Azoff, and I'm the Good Food Institute's Corporate Engagement Specialist in the US. And I'm also joined today by my colleagues and my co-creators of this LINC initiative, Carlotta Lucas and Molly O'Donnell. Carlotta is GFI Europe's Corporate Engagement Manager, and Molly is GFI US's Corporate Engagement Coordinator, and you'll be hearing from both of them at various points in today's seminar. So for those of you who are attending your first LINC seminar, LINC stands for Learn, Inspire, Network, and Collaborate. And over the years, GFI has received feedback from various stakeholders that our team interacts with, whether it's from food manufacturers or upstream supply chain companies, that there's really a desire for more opportunities to connect and to collaborate with other companies in the space. So while one-on-one introductions can certainly be made, we wanted to provide a space for industry stakeholders such as yourselves to convene, to learn together, to network, and hopefully collaborate. So we founded this community based on the belief that by convening a really diverse range of stakeholders, we can drive industry-wide change and grow the entire sector in a way that benefits all. So these seminars are quarterly, and each session is dedicated to a specific topic that GFI's research has indicated is critical to addressing industry bottlenecks and to accelerating the growth of the alternative protein sector. And today's topic, as you can see next to me, not sure which side it's on, is mitigating plant-based protein supply and processing constraints. So you can see the agenda here. We have a 50-minute long seminar followed by a 45-minute long networking session on the Meetaway platform, which I will explain shortly. And so to start us off, we're going to have my colleague Carlotta walk you through kind of a brief presentation that outlines some of the major supply and processing constraints in the plant-based industry. And it's based off a report that GFI published that explores the substantial ingredient supply chain needs, the manufacturing facility requirements, and the level of investment really necessary to avoid future supply constraints and to successfully meet global plant-based meat production targets. So after Carlotta's presentation, we will hear from three experts whose work offers three really unique and innovative solutions to the supply and processing challenges that Carlotta is going to outline. We're going to learn about crop optimization from Kurt Long, who's the Vice President of Proteins at Benson Hill. We're going to learn about upcycling side streams from Jacqueline Hawkreiter, who's the Global Director of Sustainability and Marketing at Evergreen. We're going to learn about scaling up novel proteins, specifically beans, from Fernando Santana, the founder, director of strategy and business development at RNS Blumos Carnevale. And unfortunately, our fourth speaker could not join us last minute today. That was Alexandra Mosch, who's the vice president of the European Algae Biomass Association. She also sits on the boards of All Microalgae and Seastrians. And she was going to be speaking about scaling up novel proteins, specifically algae. So if you want to connect with her, please just send us an email and we can make that introduction. And each of our fabulous presenters is going to share a 5-minute flash presentation, followed by a 2 or 3 minute Q&A that Molly will be leading. So I have the fun job of giving that 1-minute warning after 4 minutes. So if you hear me chime in, that's what I'm doing. And please type your questions in the chat. We'll have time for 1 or 2. And if we have more that we don't get to, we can make sure they're answered at another time. And if you don't mind just muting so we can hear. And lastly, we are recording the seminar. You'll all receive a link to the recording after the seminar. And you have all been pre-registered for the networking session on Meetaway. So if you'd like to attend that, which I really hope that you will do, I'm going to direct everyone to the platform after the flash presentations, but Carlotta is going to just paste the link to Meetaway in the chat right now, and we'll do so at the end of the presentation and explain it a little more. So without further ado, hand it over to Carlotta Lucas.
Thanks so much, Marika. Let me try to share my screen. I think you may need to stop sharing your screen first. Oh,
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. Let's see. All right. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you today. So indeed, over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be sharing the results of a report that GFI released earlier this year, which predicts the production requirements for plant-based meat in 2030, including the plant-based ingredients. And if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them in the chat. My colleague Pri Panescu, who is GFI's senior plant-based scientist, is online and there to help answer some of those. But before we dive into the results, let me take a step back for a minute to share why we decided to undertake this analysis. So, as we're all aware, there are a variety of plant-based meat market projections out there, and many forecast high growth rates. In the food and agricultural system, a transformation of this size has significant implications for the ingredient supply chain and infrastructure, which will require time and substantial capital to manifest. So we asked ourselves the question, if we assume that these estimates are directionally correct, how many ingredients would we need to make that much plant-based meat? Would there be shortages of important raw materials? How much manufacturing capacity would be needed? And how much would all this infrastructure expansion cost? We decided to create a hypothetical future scenario to analyze this. So our analysis is grounded in a hypothetical scenario where plant-based meat captures 6% of the global meat and seafood market in 2030. We calculated this by identifying the annual average retail sales growth rate of plant-based meat in the US between 2017 and 2019, which was 18%. And we assume this rate applies globally and will remain constant through 2030. From here, we then converted that market share estimate into volumetric requirements. So the FAO estimates that in 2030, the global meat demand will be 400 million metric tons. And so at a 6% market penetration rate, that means the industry will need to produce about 25 million metric tons of plant-based meat in 2030 to meet market demand. I do want to underscore for a second that this is a hypothetical scenario, and so this demand estimation used for this analysis is not GFI's projection of what future demand will be. Rather, it's just kind of a specific forecast that's also benchmarked to third-party market research firms, and that we're using now to provide insights and to help illustrate kind of some of the innovation and investment required to hit these commonly cited production targets. So in this report, we focus on two aspects of the supply chain, on ingredients and infrastructure requirements. And today we're going to be focusing on ingredients. So what did we find? Well, first we analyzed the ingredient list of the top 75 products with the highest US sales in 2020. In this table, you see the 8 most commonly utilized ingredients across the 3 plant-based meat categories we analyzed, and the percentages represent the share of products from each category that contain the respective ingredient. And as you can see, there's really a widespread use of just a small numbers of proteins and lipids in these plant-based meat products. And I think, unless we see a significant market disruption take place, we can expect that plant-based meat industry will continue to rely heavily on a select group of ingredients and their respective raw commodities. So then we identified the most common plant-based meat formulations that could dominate markets in 2030. So once again, looking at the ingredient list of those top 75 plant-based meat products, we found that 62% of products are wheat and soy-based, 16% of products are pea-based, and 14% are purely soy-based. The remaining share we attributed to an emerging protein category, which in our model is made up of chickpea and pea-based formulation, which makes about 8% of the plant-based meat products. We then consulted with plant-based formulation experts and analyzed the available information on product labels to estimate the relative ingredient contents for each product by weight. So once we had that, we combined the 25 million metric tons data point with these formulation breakdowns, with ingredient production data, and the UN FAO's commodity projections to extrapolate future global ingredient needs for the industry in 2030. And these are the results. So this table shows the outputs for the 8 key ingredients mentioned previously, along with their projections for 2030. This includes their projected demand in million metric tons, their share of projected global ingredient production, and their share of projected global raw commodity production. And over the next few minutes, I'm just going to dive a little bit deeper into 2 ingredients specifically: soy protein concentrate and pea protein. So if we look at soy protein concentrate, we can see that without additional investment, the plant-based meat industry may require as much as 3 times the projected global supply of soy protein concentrate that will be available in 2030. And although soy is one of the most widely traded commodities and global supply chains are well established, a large fraction of global soy protein concentrate that exists, probably about 2/3, is an alcohol washed low concentration product that is less suitable for plant-based meat application. It is actually often instead used as animal feed, particularly for aquaculture. So that's why an expansion of intermediary processing capacity to create soy protein concentrates and isolates suitable for plant-based application will be key to really closing this gap between demand and supply. Next, if we look at pea protein, we can see here as well that the plant-based meat industry is going to require more than we're expected to supply. So as much as 10 times the share of the projected global ingredient production in 2030 and 34% of overall pea production. And as an industry, I think we're all aware that pea protein has seen significant demand growth in the last decade because of its taste and functionality, lower environmental impact, and non-allergenic qualities. And this has led to its widespread use in plant-based meat. And we are seeing ingredient suppliers significantly increasing production capacity, but it seems that there's still a gap. Part of it is due to the relatively low protein content of pea protein, which leads to a large volume of byproducts and particularly pea starch. And today there's really a lack of viable commercial uses for pea protein byproducts, and that makes production of pea protein highly susceptible to commodity prices, volatile commodity prices. So without greater investment to improve the commercial viability of pea protein side streams, the price of the ingredient may become restrictive, and we can't take full advantage of it for kind of plant-based meat production. So side streams is one thing we need to think about when it comes to pea protein, but still the biggest bottleneck, similar to soy protein concentrate, is the processing capacity. So if we invest additional capital into building up this processing capacity to create pea protein isolates and concentrates, we could unlock much greater volumes there. So these are just a few quick insights from the analysis. We'll be sharing the report, and you can read through all this in much more detail, but hopefully it's already clear that having sufficient ingredient supply is going to be critical to increasing plant-based meat production in the future and meeting demand in the coming decade, especially for proteins like soy and pea. Fortunately, there are clear opportunities to mitigate these challenges, either by investing in additional processing capacity, as I've been mentioning, but also by driving further innovation. And so over the next half hour, we'll be hearing from a number of experts who Marika has already introduced, who will be sharing their innovative approaches, from crop optimization to leveraging side streams to scaling of novel proteins that can collectively help to address this protein supply challenge. So with that, I want to say thank you, and Marika, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carlotta. I pasted that report in the chat if you'd like to read further. So now we're going to jump right into flash presentations. Up first, we have Kurt Long, the Vice President of Proteins at Benson Hill, who will be talking about crop optimization. Kurt, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, America, and thanks for the setup, Carla. I think there's there's a lot of good stuff to build upon there. So I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm Kurt Long. I lead the protein businesses at Benson Hill. I've been at Benson Hill for a little over a year, and the early part of my career I spent actually at a large ag processor focused on the alternative protein space. And really, one of the main reasons that I moved over and decided to join a company like Benson Hill is because of these challenges that Carlotte's talking about today, right? So the world is going to continue to need sustainable sources of affordable proteins, right? Soy being one of those, pea being another, and there's a lot of other stuff that's happening in the industry that's exciting. But as I spent the early part of my career kind of assessing what we needed to do to change our approach to be able to address some of these challenges, not only availability, but also taste, texture, structure, function, nutrition, is to think beyond the mechanical process, right? So we've talked a lot about processing constraints, limiting overall demand, but what if we start better from the beginning and start to innovate around the seed? And that's what Benson Hill is doing. So we use a technology-informed data platform to inform our genetic pipeline, to where we're actually developing specific genetics in the soy and pea protein space, which allow us to plant and harvest soybeans and peas with higher protein and more advantaged output traits. The challenge that the industry's had with this up to this point has just been around the incentives at the farm gate, right? So you have your large seed companies who are focused on yield versus output traits. And there's been a lot of great innovation that goes into that because it's needed to sustain population growth. But think about, most of the soybeans that are being harvested are going into feed and food applications. And then the ingredient companies have to use a mechanical process to make those imperfect grains suitable for human consumption. So I'll use a simple example as it relates to the SPC challenge, right? Most of you on the call are probably familiar with like the categorization of soy proteins. You've got your flours, which are going to be below 65% proteins, but they're typically 50 to 53%. You've got your SPCs, which are kind of your 65% all the way up to 90%, but they're typically 70%. And then you've got your isolates, which are 90% above. The reason you have those specific protein categories is simply because the mass balance of pea or of soy in the industry is always the same, right? Soybeans are soybeans. And in fact, they actually been reducing in protein content over the past 20 years. Now, think of it as a challenge to where if you were able to increase the protein content in your soy through a simple extraction process where you're taking out the oil, right? You can yield a product that's 65% protein, which is a concentrate right off the bat without having to invest in the alcohol extraction process, which is one of those current bottlenecks. So this is something that Benson Hill had been focused on over the past 10 years, and something we continue to be excited about is one of the ways that our genetics are supporting kind of this improvement in the supply chain to be able to address some of these challenges. Along with that comes the sustainability benefits, right? So if you don't have to put steel in the ground, you're not incurring the water and the energy burden to produce the products. It's a pretty significant uptick. Now, at the same time, by avoiding an alcohol extraction process, what happens is you still have sugars in the product, right? So you might have a 65% protein that still has inherent sugars within the product. So then you have to look at the balance within the sugars. So what are the sugars that cause gut distress, right? What are the sugars that are anti-nutrients in feed, you name it. So we've taken some steps to address that sugar profile as well. So as Benson Hill in general, right, we've developed these varieties, but then the next step is how do you get it past the farm gate and get it up to scalable, commercializable, I guess scale to say again, to where it actually is making an impact. And to get past the farm gate, we've actually had to develop our own closed loop where we're directly contracting with these farmers, paying them premiums based on output trait versus yield, how the industry is currently working, and then actually buying that grain back and processing into our own ingredient portfolio to justify those higher premiums that we're paying the farmers. So we bought our, go ahead. Well, 1 minute. So we bought our Creston Crush facility at the end of last year, where we are commercializing food grade soy ingredients out of that facility currently, kind of in year one. That's allowed us to contract significant amount of acres to get our varieties in the field and make it more palatable for a larger player to then take the baton and move forward into the further process space. So as we're currently focused on commercializing our flour ingredients or high protein flours. So think about it as being your 60 to 65% flour, which adds a different type of nutrition and functionality in applications. We have also locked in a strategic partnership deal with one of the larger players, ADM, who's going to be carrying forward some of that innovation in the alternative protein space and the higher protein category. So that's a little bit of a update on what we've been up to and how Benson Hill is working to address some of these supply challenges. Questions?
Thank you so much, Kurt. That was succinct, perfect. We have my colleague Molly is going to ask a couple questions we received in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So first question comes from Pri, our senior scientist for plant-based protein. She'd love to hear more about your recent partnership with ADM and how that'll improve the scalability and supply chain for your product, which I know you just alluded to.
Yeah, so it's something we're certainly excited about and something we've been working on for quite some time. And when we look at the strengths of Benson Hill and the strengths of ADM as it relates to scalability in that kind of finished ingredient state beyond the flours, we felt like they were a perfect fit for us to collaborate with more closely. So the deal is related to the human nutrition space in the North American territory, and we'll be commercializing them over the coming years.
Thank you. And next, this will be our last question for the Q&A. Have you considered using your soy product in conventional meat blends? Pri says she could see the minimal processing being advantageous from a cost perspective for blends that need to be cheap to compete with conventional animal protein.
Yeah, I love that question, right? Because for us, it's not about kind of a binary meat or no meat, right? It's all about plant-based protein and making sure we're supporting population growth sustainably. I mean, we're interested in a lot of different industries, one of those being obviously plant-based meat, but also extended meat of the blends is certainly a focus area. Also, we're targeting bakery and snacks, as we've seen a lot of efficacy with these minimally processed flours and a lot of those categories. So it's new, right? So you're playing right in between that 50 to 70. Right. So it's kind of a new category that we're trying to create there and leveraging a lot of application expertise to kind of understand the fit and make sure that customers ultimately have a good understanding so they can go create value with their consumer base.
Well, thank you, Kurt. Those are all the questions we'll have time for. But if you do have additional questions, I'm sure Kurt would be happy to answer them in the chat. And you can also send us an email after this, and he'd be happy to be in touch. And now off to you, Marika.
And real quick, I have to jump, so I can't join the networking, but I'll just put my email in the chat and people can just email me directly with questions.
Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you, guys.
Molly. Awesome. Quick little shift. We're actually going to go to Fernando Santana next. Fernando is the founder and the director of strategy and business development at R&S Blumos, and he will be talking about scaling up novel proteins, specifically beans. I'll pass it over to you, Fernando.
Thank you, Marika. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Always, I say yes to GFI invitations, and very happy to be here with you. For people that know me, I'm Fernando Santana. People that don't know me, I am the same, Fernando Santana, founder of R&S Blumos. We are a Brazilian company based here in the São Paulo metropolitan area, in the southwest part of Brazil. And we are a hub of food tech. Our company has like 14 years in the distribution business. So we know a lot about pea protein and other proteins because we are like curators of special ingredients since the first moment, animal-free ingredients since 2008. So we have a nice journey in this field of plant-based ingredients. 4 years ago, we started to think how to do more things, how to create more things, and we create a combinativity facility based here in Cotia that we make special combinations of ingredients, especially protein concentrates. And why we do that? In 2016, I've heard a quote that I always remember. It's very important to me. I've heard for the first time that pulses in beans could save the world. And I never forget, I've heard that in 2016 because 2016 was an international year for pulses and beans for FAO. 2013 was the quinoa international year, and we are the #1 here in quinoa, in promoting quinoa and ancient grains to the Brazilian industry. And I was very excited to learn more about pulses and beans, and we did that. So we are the company, the leader in supplying pea ingredients in Brazil, and we started to combine. For us, I have 3 words in my mind. That one is combinativity or combination with creativity. Another one is affordability, and the other one is biodiversity. I see a long era of single ingredients, especially in the protein side: soy protein, soy concentrate protein, soy texturized protein. Okay, now pea is the new soy. Everyone wants to have pea. When I look into the vegetable kingdom, we see millions and millions of possibilities. And remember that quote, pulses and beans could save the world. We started to understand how Brazilian agriculture could participate more on this field. Everyone knows that Brazil is strong in soy and corn for especially feed application. And why not to change a little bit and to add more biodiversity into this arena? So we started to think about the Brazilian beans. Brazil is becoming an important partner, important player in these bean fields. We are a huge consumer of beans. People that know Brazil knows that the daily dish for a Brazilian is rice and beans. And we have a special bean called carioca bean that is similar to pinto bean in USA, but there is a special Brazilian cultivation. And we have black beans too. But also, 10 years ago, Brazil starts to produce in the farm new kind of beans, cowpea beans, chickpea for exportations. We have here some areas.
1 minute warning, Fernando.
Already developed that produce like 5 seasons, 5 crops in 2 years. So we have space to do more. What we create with that, we have a special partnership with Wenger Technology in the extrusion side. Here in Cotia, besides that, the combinativity facility, we have the extrusion facility running a wet extrusion system, but also we do dry extrusion. So we started to create texturized protein in both technologies, dry and wet, combining proteins, not just one ingredient. So we combine pea with soy in concentrate bean protein, or soy in the Brazilian beans. We are now working with a guar bean and trying to have a nice product from guar corma, 50 or 6% concentration, use dry fractionation. We are running a new facility for dry concentration for combination with isolation. So there is a huge future for new crops and to add more biodiversity and to try to regenerate agriculture using a new kind of beans and pulses here in Brazil. And we think there is a space for exportation also.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fernando. I know we're certainly very interested in talking about novel protein sources. I always wonder, like, for example, with the rise of oat milk a few years ago, like, what are the other ingredients that are just hiding out there that we don't know about yet that are really going to take off? So really exciting to hear you talk about those novel protein sources. We'd love to know for some of those additional legumes that you mentioned, would you be able to share more about the more unique functionalities and nutritional profiles of those protein sources you're working on?
Yes, well, beans are a rich source of protein and minerals and some fibers. So when you have the protein concentration, we do a very minimum process system that is dry fractionation. We have a protein concentrate that we can combine with other proteins and improve the nutritional profile of other protein isolates or concentrates. And also we have a very important fraction that is Carlotta was talking about, for example, the side ingredients you have from the pea processing. We have the same from the beans, but we can use this in bakery. You can use this in snacks, extruded snacks, that is also contain a very important amount of protein, very very good content of fibers and some resistant starch. And of course, we think there is a way to give more nutrition to people using this kind of processing, because in the end, several countries are consuming less legumes because it's hard to processing. You don't have time at home. So this is a way to add iron, to add some specific minerals that naturally comes from the beans into these new kind of products, texturized products, both wet or dry.
Thank you. And you answered another question that was in the chat, which was if you're using the side streams of your protein products. So really exciting to hear about the other applications. Last question we have time for. Hopefully it's a more simple one. Lane asks which countries you're focusing on for exportation.
Well, we have today demands from all over the world for both proteins, concentrate for extrusion, that comes from our combinativity facility, number one. But also we have demands from texturized, red texturized proteins. We have both. We have the wet extruded materials coming from our line number one here in Cotia. And also we have texturized ingredients for exportation. We have capabilities for both. And especially South America is looking, our neighbors here in Brazil, we see demands from USA and Canada, and also from Middle East. And we are very happy to receive demand from people who are here interested about.
Thank you so much, Fernando. So those are all the questions we'll have time for, but I see this other question from Bruce in the chat. I know you just sort of touched on the dry and wet extrusion, but if you wouldn't mind adding maybe a little more color to that in the chat, I'm sure Bruce would appreciate it. And now I will turn things over to Marika to introduce our next speaker. Thank you all.
Thank you, Fernando. I love the show and tell. I didn't realize how much I needed that. It's so helpful to actually see the products right in front of our virtual eyes. So thank you for having those props. So up next, I'm going to pass it to Jackie Hawkrider, who is the Global Director of Sustainability and Marketing at Evergreen, who will be talking about leveraging side streams. And we'll share our screen in just a moment. Take it away, Jackie.
Hey everybody, it's great to be with you here today, and it's good to see some faces from GFI and beyond. I hope you've had a wonderful time here just learning and sharing from each other. And I'm excited to take you through a very, very quick couple of slides, which just talks about the upcycling and the byproduct opportunity here, and then what Evergreen has achieved or done about it. So I will have you flip through to the next slide, Marika. Just a quick positioning here. I think everybody on this call agrees. Let me know if you don't. That's also totally fine. But food waste is an interesting issue. It's actually the maybe not the only thing, but we had a stat come through around last year. It was from the Upcycle Food Association in association with Mintech. And the survey found that 99% of people agree that food waste is an issue. Now, in a world where 99% of people can't agree on anything anymore, we found that very compelling. And we really dialed it back to the fact that people care. You know, it's an issue that's very close to people's hearts. People can think through what they do with their food and their food waste and what that really means to them and their planet. So it's something that, again, almost 100% of people agree is an issue. If we drill down on the next slide to what the areas of the food chain is that are contributing to food waste, you'll see an interesting picture. So this is breaking up the food waste that happens at production, at processing, at distribution, and at in-home or final consumer use. And the trend is really that, you know, the more advanced the economy, the more food waste happens at the consumer level. Or, you know, in your home, you throw food away, you have too much left over in your fridge, whatever the case may be, you take leftovers and you don't eat them. In the developing world and the most developing world, really, there's the sub-Saharan African subset, where I grew up, in fact, in South Africa. You have a lot of loss and waste in the production, in the processing, in the food creation. Imagine almost 70% of your food waste happening before it even leaves the field. So we at AB InBev here is the largest brewer in the world. We produce beer, so we're in the production, handling, storage, and processing space. We are part of this picture in the fact that a bunch of the grains or the byproduct of the brewing process would just go ahead to cattle feed or directly to the bin, or, you know, to a place where they would take to be buried or used for other applications. And that was something that we in AB InBev and now at Evergreen thought there had to be a solution to, particularly because that protein was so high quality in that grain side stream. And you'll get to see that on the next slide. So not only are we talking about high quality protein, we're talking about 2.7 million tons of protein that not only AB InBev, but the entire brewing industry produces as a byproduct of brewing every year. We also have tons and tons of fibers. You'll see hemicellulose and cellulose there, and very, very low carbs. Reason being, all the carbohydrates head over to the brewer side and get turned into alcohol. Now, what we also understood was that these nutrients were currently going to cows. Cows were metabolizing this plant protein, and they were giving back protein in the form of beef to humans at a 2% efficiency. So for every kilogram of protein you feed to a cow, you only get, you know, the 2% of that back, 20 grams of protein in your body. Now imagine if we could take that protein and feed the world. And that's something that on the next slide you'll see is a very, very appealing prospect from the protein business side, which is what Evergreen is now focusing on. When you look at the barley in the field, you're looking at 75% carbohydrates. Now you're taking that carbohydrate out, sending it off to go be brewed for beer, and what you're left with is that 2.7 million tons of protein. So that for us is what we saw as the potential, and that's what we've essentially done here in St. Louis, where I'm dialing in from today, is we've built a facility which can actually take on all of those grains, extract the proteins, filter them, purify them, dry them, and you come out with a fantastic tasting, highly, highly soluble barley protein that can function as a game changer in the world of sports nutrition, protein shakes, you know, anything, coffee with protein, anything that you want to kind of boost that plant protein that you don't get from meat anymore during your day. That's the kind of thing that we're looking to drive. Next.
One more minute, Jackie.
Okay. I'm going to skip over this one.
You have a minute and a half if you want. We have a little extra time.
Okay, no stress. No, the composition was just versus the other plant proteins. But this is one that I don't want to skip over, because not only is it an incredible source of protein nutrition, and you know functions very well in tasty beverages, but it is quantifiably the lowest carbon footprint of any protein available at scale today. So we love alternative proteins. We love plant proteins. I mean, Fernando would have talked to you about peas and pulses. Peas and pulses are nitrogen fixing. So they do have a very, very low carbon footprint as it is, because they take greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere and they pop them back in the soil. But they also take up land. you got to cut down rainforests to grow soybeans. You got to cut down rainforests to grow some pulses and beans. What about if we could do more with less? And that's what the whole movement of upcycling is about, and the whole movement of taking your byproducts from something that used to be waste and putting it back into circulation is all about. So just wrapping this up, we can move through, Marika. I just wanted to leave you with a couple of key learnings, because this all sounds awesome, but it's not as simple or as easy as it looks. And these are just a couple of takeaways that might resonate with some of you, might be a little new to others. I mean, consumers care about taste. Sustainability is the ante. Of course, it's the cost of entry, but taste is everything. And then getting that taste right, and then selling an organization that normally brews beer, a protein store, an alternative protein story is, it's tough, mostly because it's hard to build factories and to build protein processing facilities, especially when it's never been done before by anybody else in the world. There are also, a lot of things in the nutrition space which aren't very clear cut. You've got a lot of people who have a commercial interest in telling a story. A lot of big companies who created the narrative that dairy is good for you, that you can't get good protein except from animal sources. And that's something that just as a plant-based community, I think we all acknowledge. But the truth is out there, and it's certainly something that as more of us get talking and get going, I think people will start to come around. So that being said, all I wanted to encourage you to do is join our movement, join us, reach out to me, get in touch. You'll have my details on the last slide. I don't know, Marika, if you can share that out to the group, but I'm very, very happy for all of you to reach out and obviously to answer any of your questions just right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. That was a great presentation, and yeah, really excited to learn about how you're just pushing the levers of sustainability to create a really sustainable ingredient. Even, already compared to conventional animal agriculture, many alt proteins are, hit the mark on sustainability, but it's, going even above and beyond that is really great to hear. So first question from the chat, are you selling this protein as an ingredient right now? And just generally, what is your go-to-market strategy?
We are, Bruce, great question. It's an ingredient that we're commercializing as EverPro. I'm just going to type that in the chat for people to look up. But yeah, it's a barley protein. It's pretty simple. People are putting it in protein shakes, and then those companies are obviously launching the protein powder protein shake to market. We're also selling to a coffee company. They've got a barley milk latte available in the market. We've done barley milk, so we provide the barley protein, and then brands are looking at creating an alternative milk that's not based or pea based or rice based, which is just expanding those options that people have to get their plant-based nutrition from multiple sources. Great question, thank you.
Thank you. Next question here. Drying side streams seems to be a major bottleneck for their use as ingredients. Could you speak to how Evergreen works to overcome this bottleneck?
Yeah, so Pri, thank you so much for the question. Very, very, well, basically spot on in terms of your insights. The dryer was one of the most expensive pieces of equipment that went in our facility just opposite us here. It's a 7-story piece of equipment from top to bottom, and it's considered small for the industry standards. It's normally like 15 stories high, and it just takes up, it's just mammoth. So that was certainly embedded in my comment. Facilities are expensive. It's definitely a financial bottleneck. What we did in the early days was we sent our product to co-manufacturers to dry, and then trucked it back. Now, obviously, that's not sustainable from a business or environmental perspective on the long term. So it's certainly something that you just got to, take into that business case, look at all the options, prove the concept with co-manufacturers. But once you get to doing it yourself, it's important that you build that all into your infrastructure.
Thank you. And final question here. What types of partnerships are you looking for, and what would be most supportive for scaling up your protein?
So we're looking for like-minded partners. We're looking for companies who are agile, companies who believe in the plant-based movement, in the plant-based space, who want to provide good nutrition to people everywhere. And companies who are willing to grow with us. You know, we're not looking to just tie ourselves into the behemoths of the protein space, which, you know, supply the hospitals in America, which would be easy for us, but, you know, we want to get in there rather with the companies who are doing something different and important for consumers everywhere. So I think that's, you know, if you see yourself or your company in that, if you've got an awesome, agile, cool, consumer-facing drink brand or ice cream brand or, you know, snack or bar brand, that's giving people high dosage of plant protein, up to 35 grams a serving, which is almost everything you need for your daily intake, if you're kind of an average-sized adult. That's, yeah, those are the kind of brands that we're really, really looking to connect with.
Thank you. So those are all the questions we have time for. We want to make sure we give everyone as much time for networking as possible. There is, I think, one more question from Bruce in the chat. So Jackie, if you wouldn't mind just answering that in the chat as we close out. And now I will hand things over to Marika to close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jackie. And if you want, you're welcome to also put your email in the chat, as you mentioned, but we will be sharing out the recording of the presentation in later today or early tomorrow. So thank you all. Thank you so much to our presenters for sharing all of your unique and exciting solutions, and for all of the questions from our members. If you want to get in touch with our presenters, you can definitely shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat in a moment. A couple of them have pasted their contact info in the chat. And so before we sign off, briefly, just want to describe Meetaway for a moment. So I believe Carlotta will paste the link in the chat. All you really need to do when you click on that link, you're all pre-registered, is you just kind of enter the platform, and you'll be prompted to meet different people every, I believe, 5 minutes. You can extend time, you can select who you'd like to meet with on the homepage. It's all pretty simple and self-explanatory once you dive into the platform. And before we sign off, I just wanted to mention that the email you'll receive with the recording will also have a feedback survey that we would really, really appreciate you filling out. We take your feedback very seriously, and our goal is really to make this group as useful for you all as possible. So our last seminar, we received some feedback that the networking portion of the seminar was really the most valuable. So we increased that time from 30 to 45 minutes. So we take your feedback seriously. And in that email, that follow-up email, you'll also receive an invitation to our next quarter seminar, which will be on December 6th. We're going to announce the topic of that seminar sometime in November, because we really want to base it largely on the feedback that we receive in the feedback survey. So without further ado, click on that Meetaway link. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hang out for a minute if folks need support accessing Meetaway. Thank you so much. All right, all. Seems like everyone's finding their way. See you next quarter.